So that's who I am. I'm not quite a key handhold surgeon, but a keyhole surgeon and a robotic surgeon, and I work locally. I'd like to think that the pictures I show aren't too gory. There's not going to be gory detail, and I'll explain why. So I've been going to Gaza with Medical Aid for Palestinians since 2019. But over the last few years, that journey's changed quite significantly to a journey that I just don't even recognise anymore. And I'm going to take you through that journey from how it started and how my most recent journey was. Again, can you hear me at the back? No. Okay, we'll try and talk louder. Does that help? Okay. So I put that slide up because I don't think we're here to glorify or gratify or just to ogle over somebody else's grief. That there are videos out there. If you don't know what's happening in Gaza at the moment, then I'm not sure where you've been for the last 6 months. There's plenty out there on social media to show what's happening. And we really shouldn't be objectifying these people in their hour of need, at their most vulnerable. So I try very hard not to show people suffering. I can't say how true that is. I don't know if you can read that, but the 4 sounds you hear are drones, and the drones are incessant. There's bombs. But you also hear children laughing. And one thing I say about Palestine and Gaza, and I can't explain why, but as soon as I went the first time, I just fell in love with the Palestinians. I can't help it. And if you ask me for a reason why, I can't give you a reason. But maybe if you can indulge me in this video, this might explain a bit of why. So you don't need to hear it, you can read the subtitles there. So, I defy anybody not to fall in love with that little girl. She's just gorgeous, isn't she? But what you've got to remember is that she's displaced, she's lost her house, and she's sending candy to help the family survive. But the resilience that the Gazans have, the Palestinians have, is unmatched. And I say that from my experience from 29 onwards, but I say that particularly now that it just puts me to shame. So it started in 2019. In Gaza, if you're diagnosed with cancer, you're not allowed out. And so there are people in Gaza that are dying of cancers that are operable, that they should be surviving from. So I was invited in 2019 to upskill the surgeons in Gaza. So if somebody is diagnosed with cancer, at least the local surgeons can manage it. So that's what I've been doing. I've been doing it remotely, so this is pre-October 7, obviously. Every 2 weekly, I'm on my mobile phone, and we're doing something called a multidisciplinary team meeting, where all the cancers are presented, and we tell them what to do and how to do it. And it's too complicated, they save it for one of my trips. I'm also available. The problem with mobile phones is you can't get away, can you? But in this instance, it's a pleasure to be available. And so people will contact me in the middle of the night or during the day and just say, look, what do I do? So, 40-year-old gunshot, those sorts of things. So I'm available whenever they need me. The surgical missions that I go on usually last 5 days. So we land in Israel, in Tel Aviv, go through Ben Gurion Airport to the Eretz crossing. You're aware of the Eretz crossing, which is about 45 minutes from Tel Aviv. The Eretz crossing, I'm not even going through that experience, it's just another experience that isn't important right now. But what we do is it's a 5-day mission where we go through the cancers, decide what I'm going to do, and then operating, a conference at the end, and then coming back. This is regular Gazan challenges means this is pre-October 7. These are the sort of challenges you have. Now, I don't think you need to be too close to realise that the pictures there are actually very difficult to interpret. It's like you're operating undersea. And often, I'm operating, the camera goes off for a second and it comes on for 3, it goes off as a second, comes on for 3. So you've got to work in that context, but also with those sorts of colours. And the next slide here. Okay, so 2 comments. One is we get regular power cuts, but 2 is the first thing they do when the power cuts comes on is they just laugh and they smile. And that's a typical Gazan for you. So, that was then. I've done a number of trips since 2019, pre-October 7. My next mission was meant to be 14th to the 19th of October, and clearly that was cancelled because of what's happened. But then I was invited to be one of the first emergency medical teams to go into Gaza. So I went into Gaza with 1 week's notice. I had a phone call on the 31st of December saying, would you like to go next Saturday? So I went in on the 6th of January. Yeah, I'm going to play this video here. So this is where the hotel is where I used to stay, and that's the mosque. And that's what it looks like now. So you get the idea, it's just completely decimated. That's a targeted attack, apparently. While that's playing, I'll show you this picture. This is me with the Gazans in the hotel having breakfast. I had the occasion to find out where the hotel, that's the hotel, that's the very same room now, it's just gone. But, you know, no surprises there. So this is Shifa Hospital. We all know Shifa Hospital. Unfortunately, we know Shifa Hospital now. This is in normal times with a nice sort of forecourt in front of the surgical building. But now there are just bodies. There's piles of bodies, body upon body upon body. It's just, it's terrible. They've run out of mortuary space. They use ice cream containers with ice in order to house these bodies. I think Bella alluded to this, and you know, it defies belief. You just have to think about it. You know, you're taking children's limbs off without any pain relief, without any anaesthetic. This isn't a religious thing, this is just a humanity thing. You know, how is that right? How can that be allowed to happen? But that's what's happening. There's a very sinister disappearance of colleagues that I've worked with, a very sinister, either they've not survived or they've disappeared. And I heard even yesterday that one of the colleagues that I trained as a registrar there, Khalid, he's disappeared. Don't know where he's gone. And I dread to think what's happening to him. So this is a slightly messy slide, but this is the sort of thing that the guys, I'm trying to use this text to hide their faces. You can't see their faces. So in the early days, I'm being told, don't worry, this is a doctor, by the way, we're fine, there's no safety, you can read that. He's in the shelter where there's unimaginable disasters. But then recently, he said, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah means thanks to God, I'm fine. But then he says, but I'm sorry, Alhamdulillah, thanks to God, I lost all my family last week. And he sent me this picture, which I had before, during happy times, then he resent it with a mark against everybody that has been killed. And I've worked with doctors who go to work and then they come back and everything's gone. You know, that's not an unusual circumstance. I really try not to upset you, but this is the reality of what's happening out there. So my journey to Gaza, how's it changed? What happened in January when I went in January? So I was part of one of the first emergency medical teams. We landed in Cairo, we can't go through Gaza anymore. And the reason for Cairo is because actually they have to give us security training. So for reasons of insurance, they've got to train you to know what to do when somebody throws a hand grenade at you. You know, I think most of us will know, but there's a way to fall. You can see that, you know, they teach you to have a grab bag. So a grab bag is what happens if the hospital that you're in gets bombed and you have to go, you know, you have to survive in the open for a night, 2 nights, 3 nights. So you have a grab bag. The very first lecture, the very first slide, I don't know if you can see that, but that's an ambulance riddled with bullet holes. So, you know, it's a bit of a rude awakening. What to do if there's an airstrike, and what to do if there's an active shooter. So there are all things, like strategies that they teach you, what to do if you're caught in that circumstance. So the journey, we went through Rafah crossing, because clearly we can't go through Eretz anymore. The journey from Cairo to Rafah is about 16 hours, and there's about 8 Egyptian checkpoints that you have to go through. So it's laborious, but it just needs must, so that's what we do. Aid trucks, let's talk about aid trucks. This is the journey through North Sinai. I don't know if you can see the video on the right, if it plays. There we go. So, can you see? Get this in a minute. Apologies. So, I don't know if you can see, but there's truck after truck after truck. And the average delay for each truck is about 3 weeks. So if there's any perishables in there, they've perished. But things that aren't allowed to go in include nappies, and they include insulin. You know, insulin for diabetics. They include insulin pens for children aren't allowed to go in. So, don't ask me for explanations, I'm just giving you the facts. So after that long journey, we arrived in Gaza, so Palestine, Gaza, part of the UN convoy. So there was my convoy, and there was a Norwegian team called Norwag there as well. So we were then taken to our safe house. Now I want to just concentrate on the safe house. Again, I'm privileged to be on the stage, sharing the stage with the ambassador, but he probably doesn't realise he invited me a few weeks ago, and this is why he invited me. You'll realise why as I go through this talk. Now, can you see the safe house? I'm taking that video from my bedroom. Now, the reason it was designated a safe house, it's there because there's nothing around it, so nobody can say, look, really sorry, we got the safe house, but we're aiming for that. Okay, so that's the first thing. And the second thing is, it's right by the sea. This is on sand. You can't build tunnels in sand. So therefore, nobody could say, well, we target you because actually there's tunnels. So we'll come back to that later. But you get the idea that this is in the middle of nowhere. It's very desolate and isolated. So every morning we'd have a security briefing. The reason I like MAP, because they employ Gazans and they employ Palestinians who live and breathe every day within Gaza. So I have an empathy with them. So we have our security briefing and we decide where we're going to go, but also the route that we're going to go. And tragically, this is relevant from the last couple of days, because that route has to be what's called deconflicted. So as soon as we've decided what route we're going, our minder from the Palestinians would ring the Israelis and say, we're going this way. And that person would either say, yes, fine, or say, no, go another way, and then you wonder what's happening where we had planned to go originally. So those movements have to be deconflicted, and once they are, you go on a journey in a convoy. Again, I don't like taking pictures of people suffering, but this is the reality of what's happening there. There are just ad hoc space. Can you see those ad hoc tents? These aren't UN shelters, these are just space that somebody's fine and they put a tarpaulin up. The sanitation's terrible, incredibly overcrowded. And this gentleman, I didn't even realise, he's one of the doctors at the hospital, and you then realise he's not going home, he's going to a piece of tarpaulin on sand. And this is how they've been living for 6 months more. The UN shelters, these are the official shelters, but the conditions are just terrible. IDP stands for internally displaced people or personnel. There are about 60,000 people in the UN shelter. There's about 1 toilet per 1,000 people. And so the doctors that I knew that went here, one of the doctors said he wouldn't eat for 4 days, so he didn't have to queue for 6 hours to go to the loo. These are the UN, this is good, this is a good situation. And each person's living in about 1.5 metres squared, and you get an idea looking at that video. So my first day was, we went to the Ministry of Health and we told them what we were going to do. That's a political, hello, this is who we are, and it's just a courtesy that we've come to Gaza and we should introduce ourselves. So the first day we went to European Gaza, which I know because I've worked there before. And I don't know if you can see that video on the left. Can you see that clearly at the back? This is not a ward. This is a hospital space where people are living because they find hospitals are a safe haven. And I don't know if you can tell, there's literally a 3 by 3 metre curtain, and each space contains a person. You can imagine what the sanitation is like. I'll say it again, this is not a ward, this is just a hospital ward, it's a hospital thoroughfare. And people are living behind these curtains. That's all they can do because it's the only place they feel or have felt safe. Again, that's topical because that's changed recently. And I think this is quite descriptive. Look, this lady has got her washing on the banister going down the stairs. There's her pots and pans, and she's living behind that curtain there. Again, I had permission to take this video. I think some videos, hopefully, living in the hospital, just think they're living in the hospital, maybe they've got a room, any space they can find. I'll say again, I had permission to take this. People sleeping in any space they can find, and it's just unnerving on the ward. You have these fires where people are just making bread, they're baking bread on the ward because it's where they live. Most of my time was embedded in NASA Hospital. Embedded means that we stayed there 24/7 for a few days because you don't know when the airstrike's going to come. So there's no point doing a 9 to 5, going home to the safe house and feeling safe. So we stayed there 24/7. I also decided that, spoke to my team, we decided we would fast for the time we were there because it's really not PC to be eating a bar of chocolate when people are starving. So we were very careful not to eat in front of people and only ate in our space. We had a room. I want to just tell you one story of the ward. The wards are hugely overcrowded. A one-bed space has 3 or 4 people in it, okay, and they're living as patients in this space. There's no pain relief, and I went to the children's ward, and there was a young boy there who was 6 years old. I don't want to be too graphic, but the front of his tummy was open, and his bowels were hanging out. And he'd been like that for 6 months. And the analogy I would give you is that if you've got a hose pipe with lots of pinholes in it, and you pass water through the hose pipe, the water comes out like a spray through the hose pipe. He had lots of holes in his bowel, so that every time he drank or ate something, it just came out like a water fountain through his bowel. So the way to manage that is what we call nil by mouth. You stop people eating and drinking. But in this country, you would give them liquid feed through a drip, so at least you're giving them some calories. This poor boy, 6 years old, was sitting there and had been for a month, nothing to eat or drink, but no supplementary anything. So if I say skin and bones, he was literally skin and bones, because the body has to use its own material, muscles and fat in order to survive. Honestly, we gave him a lolly and he just should have seen his face. But that's the physical trauma. The mental trauma is that he lost everybody in that airstrike, his mother, his siblings and everybody. So there was no one to comfort him, and no pain relief, by the way. So I'll say it again, this isn't a religious thing. I mean, for goodness sake, this is a humanity thing. But how can that be right? So this was the operating theatres. You can predict they were chaotic, lots of things happened, and that's where we spent most of our time. So this was a typical day. Now, I'll play that video here on the left. I don't know if we've got volume there. So you get the idea that the airstrike is going on all the time. Airstrike, airstrike, airstrike. I'm taking these pictures from the hospital balcony. So we would prepare ourselves for airstrikes. As an NGO, the unnerving thing is that any other war zone, the trigger to extract the NGO is 30 kilometres. Gaza is only 40 by 10 or 11. So in Gaza, the fighting has to get to half a kilometre before they extract you. So that is pretty close, I can promise you. Now, if somebody gets injured, we dial 999, but clearly there's no ambulance service there. I don't know if you can see that picture, but there are bodies and injured people on the back of that cart. That cart is manually being pulled by these 2 people who are on a donkey and cart. That's how casualties are coming to hospital. And for that reason, anything more than... And the other thing you've got to remember is pre-October 7, Gaza was the most populous area in the world. Since October 7, that population of 2 million plus has been constituted into about a third of the space. So it's incredibly busy and it's incredibly sort of congested. So people more than half a kilometre away just don't make it to hospital in time. Significant injuries for that reason, people who need immediate life-saving surgery just don't make it to hospital. The things that do make it to hospital are things like limb fractures and burns, because that's horrible, but you can survive it. They're often not life-threatening, so they can make it in time to hospital. Most of the stuff that I saw was shrapnel, gunshots, shrapnel from missiles and gunshots. This is the horrible statistic here, that every day there are 30 new child amputees every single day, and often not just single amputees, double or quadruple even amputees. That's just the physical trauma, and often they've lost everybody as well. This is probably the most gory slide, but this was a chap who, when I was, this isn't quite in order, but we were presented with a chap that had a hole in his shoulder, so that was there. But when you felt behind, you could feel something poking out. So we put him to sleep. He'd been there for 2 days, not complaining. So this is the first thing I did, turned him onto his front, made a cut in the back and took this out. That was hiding in there. That's a massive lump of shrapnel. So I started off by thinking, God, he's lucky, but then I thought, well, hold on, what about the people around him? Because that's just one part of shrapnel. Probably everybody around him didn't survive. And not complaining, not once did he complain or say anything. Just a window into what my life was like there. We prepared ourselves for missile strikes, and that's when we had mass casualties come in. The missile strikes, A&E was chaotic, and I mean, you can imagine what it would be like. I don't think you can imagine. I still can't believe the things that I've witnessed. But you're treating people on the floor, people who you know are going to die. You cannot humanely give them something to ease the passage, from this world. They have to die in pain and in agony, and you can't do anything. And it's I don't know what the word is. It's frustrating. It's horrible as a doctor to see that and have to experience that. But I'll say it again. This isn't about me. This is about what they're going through. So this was just one strike. This was a UN truck that was hit, but it was hit outside a school. So most of the casualties were children. So we had about 60 people brought in, about 20 died or were dead, and out of the 40 injured, we had to do general surgeon, we had to do operations immediately on 10 people. That sounds easy, it wasn't, but it also sounds easy because once you've done emergency surgery on somebody, you can't just send them to the ward, you have to put them onto a life support machine and just support them through the next 24, 48 hours, even week or 2 weeks. There's no ITU capacity. The majority of injuries, brain injuries, stomach perforations, small bowel injuries, I mean, you can guess, I don't want to go through it. But that was my life in the hospital, and those are the sorts that I think every time there was an airstrike. And it's about operating wherever you have space. Now, by the way, you're not going to believe this, I'm staying on a stage talking to you, but I'm very private about what I do. These pictures aren't me saying to somebody, please take pictures of me. It's because MOP need advocacy and therefore they take their own pictures, and these were just shared. So when that, need to do 10 operations immediately thing happens, then you open any operating space available. So we open an obstetric theatre, which is where children should be born, and use that to operate. So you get the idea, you operate, and that was in another building, so you're running from one building to the next, hopping between one theatre to the next theatre. Okay, so what was the most intense night of my life? This was the most intense night of my life. Now, imagine you've got no internet, you've got no mobile phone signal, so you're blind. And I know this afterwards because my wife and children told me. They were following somebody called Bissan. Have you heard of Bissan on Instagram? There's lots of nods there. And I now know that Bissan was on the top floor of the hospital, but she had a satellite phone, so could get information in and out, which I didn't know. And she's saying Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis is surrounded by the army, there's no internet, carpet bombing everywhere, nowhere to go, it's the end of the world, I've never seen anything worse. So that was the most intense night of my life. Have you got volume? Because I think volumes can be quite... Do you want to do that? I just think it's a window into what they're experiencing if we just listen to this. My epitaph's going to be, I'm sorry I'm overrunning. I'm sorry I'm overrunning. That's an Israeli tank. Do you know what's really unnerving? I'm in the hospital, you're trying to operate, and you can hear tanks going on around outside. There's no internet access, I haven't got any mobile phone access. And then you know what Chinese whispers are like. Mr. Q, they're coming to get you, and you're thinking, really? But you have to carry on and ignore them. So that's the tanks that you can hear, and the shouting is really quite unnerving. The next video I'm going to play, I don't think you pause that one. I'm not sure how we do that. So this was, I think, you get the idea. That's what was happening around us. So you're within half a mile of the fighting, that's going on. And me from leafy Dorset, not used to this sort of thing, it's really quite unnerving. But what you've got to do is put that aside and do what you're there to do. And that's what we try very hard to do. Now I'm going to play the next one because I think the next one is also quite useful. This is a jet strike. There's the jet. Sorry, somebody jumped there. But that's the jet offloading its missiles around the hospital. And you get the impression that the whole hospital is reverberating. And in theatres, literally it looks like there's a possessed theatre, doors are opening and closing, windows are falling in. So that's just a window of what it's like operating in these places when this is going on. Having said that, that was intense, but the most upsetting thing, apart from the things that I witnessed, was this. You can turn the volume down for this one. This doesn't need volume. You can hear the fighting. I looked at my watch, and it was 11 at night. And now remember, these people have been probably displaced 2 or 3 times already. And I don't know if you can see, there's a stream of people coming out of their houses with blankets and boxes and children going somewhere. And I don't know why. Do you remember the song Road to Nowhere? It just came into my head. They're on a road to nowhere. They don't know where they're going. They're just trying to find somewhere that's safe with their children, with their boxes, and it just affected me. I don't know if you can see, there's a stream of people just there. That was the most upsetting thing that I saw, or one of the most upsetting. Now, why did our mission finish early? It's because of this. I'll play that video. Can you?
Rations and our offices or guest house. This is a site of one of our partners that has been hit a couple of days ago. And as you can see, the result of
that's my bedroom just there, so that's where I was sleeping.
Quite shocking.
So we get the idea, so we can pause that. So we were the subject of a F-16 airstrike. I never thought I'd say those words, but I was in bed. We just prayed our morning prayers, and then this happened. Because I realised this was a war crime, I thought I'd just get my camera out, and whether I survived or not, I thought there'd be something there. So the video on the left, it's just happened. You can see the ceiling's fallen in, I'm on my bed, it's just happened. The roof has fallen in, and then you'll see the doors. The doors are off the hinges, everything's just, that's what happened. So by day, we had a look, and this was the damage. Okay, so there was a crater there. Now, if you remember the first video I showed of the safe house, which was beautiful, so that's where the missile hit. And this is my bedroom that I'm videoing from. And you can see, well actually this is upstairs, the kitchen, but you can see the sort of damage that was inflicted. If you want to know what it felt like, just randomly, I found this on the internet. And this, better than any words, I can explain. This is what I felt and experienced. If you look at this video on the right, the sounds as well.
شو معلم تزبط؟ اسمع
My hair stand on end when I see that. That's exactly what I experienced. I experienced a blinding flash of light. It was dark. And it felt like the house had been taken up off its foundations and dropped down again. And that sound, that's a whizzing missile sound as well. So clearly the mission had to finish for reasons of security. So I don't know if you can see there, but we're told by the UN that they tend to target the foundations of the house so that the whole house falls down on everybody in the house rather than taking the floor, maybe somebody survives. You can see the windows and doors are on the floor, you can see the side of the house is gone, all the windows have gone. So the UN investigation said that this was a near fatal strike, caused injuries to us, thankfully, which are superficial injuries, there was no serious injury. They said it was a result of an airstrike, and it's a real slap in the face for the British government because this is a deconflicted area. So the Israelis had spoken to the British government in December to say that this is going to be a safe house, and yet it was targeted. But remember, no excuse to say, well, there was infrastructure around that we're aiming for, so we missed, really sorry. There's no tunnels where they can say, really sorry, but there were tunnels there. There are theories that I can talk to you in private about why this happened, but it happened. You know, out of all the political persuasions, credit to this person, she actually raised it in the House of Commons. It was dismissed by Andrew Mitchell, I don't know if you saw this, but it was raised in the House of Commons. The UN came the next day and said it was a deliberate, it was definitely an airstrike, because we rang the Israelis and said, what the hell's going on? This is deconflicted. They said, well, it was the Palestinians. But we're on the south coast, the rockets go the other way, not that way. And eventually they've admitted it, but initially their form is to say, no, it wasn't us. And then we were immediately, this is the really humbling thing, the Gazans literally pick you up, they feel terrible for you, but hold on, this has only happened to me once. It's been happening to you for, daily for many, many months, but they literally, metaphorically pick you up, keep you safe until you get permission from the Israelis to then be taken out in a deconflicted area. That took about 3 days, and they deposited us in the Rafah border, the Rafah crossing, and then the British ambassador to Cairo saw fit to see us as Graham Bailey. But I'm going to stop there, and I really don't want to make this about me. I think it's important that this narrative gets out there about this was a safe house, there was no infrastructure around, and that's a first-hand account as to what happened. This is the first time I'm saying this in public, pretty much. But this is about Gaza, and this is not about me.